Chapter 14. The Second Kadra'han. Amira relived Dangerth's kiss 1,000 times over and couldn't seem to stop. For the rest of the day, she kept recalling the taste of the archduke, the feel of him. After Dangerth left her in her apartment, she cried on the floor of the boudoir for the better part of an hour. She hadn't realized her hopes had gotten up until they came crashing back down. How had she even dared hope she could have a real marriage, much less one that was something other than another iteration of her service-bound existence? Since Dangerth was with Vesha, Amira accepted an invitation from Dame Rabiku for supper, attended by Thadrid. The knight was the perfect gentleman to Amira in front of an audience, though more than once she noticed his lip locked between his teeth, as if holding back some clever quip or other. The younger daughter, Gisela, smiled at Dangerth over her fan while her mother droned on about improvements to her rose gardens back home. Thadrid winked back at the girl while Dame Rabiku's attention was on Amira. At that, the girl giggled, and her elder sister, Melonia, smacked her arm. Thadrid grinned at Melonia, too, and the older sister cast him a stern look that devolved into a coy smirk. Amira summoned every ounce of discipline to avoid rolling her eyes. Dame Rabiku's servants served them roast fowl with apples and oranges. The apples and oranges had been diced and boiled in a caramel sauce that hardened into a thin glaze. Amira tapped her fork against one of the diced apples, watching the glaze crack and splinter. Candied apples, how delightful. I first had this dish at my father's second wedding. Amira supposed that now she was almost an archduchess, she could get away with not referring to him by his title all the time. He'd once ordered her to always address him formally in public and to other people. It gave her wicked pleasure to defy the order now. "Ooh, you've had it, then?" Dame Rabiku's mild question was perfectly innocent. But Amira tried not to let her annoyance show. Too many people assumed that Highlandale was a kingdom of ragamuffins and vagabonds. They kept forgetting that the civilization and protection of the empire was what her father had sold his soul and his kingdom to gain. "Yes," Amira replied mildly, despite the passive insult. "The palace employs cooks and artisans of the highest caliber." "I can confirm," Thadrid said. "Lashera is a proper imperial city. It is an entirely suitable place for one to find anything that could be found anywhere else in the empire." "Including a bride for our archduke," was the unspoken implication. Dame Rabiku promptly changed the subject after that. Dinner was cleared not long after, replaced by carafes of wine and trays of marzipan. At first glance, Amira thought they were shaped like animals, but at closer inspection realized that there were only 3 kinds. The sugary fondue was shaped into white ravens, white stags with painted antlers, and red foxes the size of small plums. Amira stiffened, recognizing the empress's white ravens and Dangerth's white stag. That meant the foxes. "Is the craftsmanship not impressive?" Dame Rabiku asked, studying the tray of tiny confectionery animals. "There are some things one can only find in the core imperial cities." Dame Rabiku's croaking voice was an echo of the younger, more beautiful, but less powerful woman she had once been. Gossips claimed that Rabiku had been the first to bed Dangerth's father nearly 30 years ago. She would have been married and more than 10 years the late emperor's senior, but the rumors still circulated. Many also whispered that was why Vesha had rejected all talk of a Rabiku girl for Dangerth's wife. It would have been borderline incestuous. Amira stared down the older woman, marshalling herself from years of practice resisting taunts and insults from her stepmother. Smiling, she reached over the little silver tongs and the tiny dessert plates on lace doilies. Never breaking eye contact, Amira picked up the marzipan fox closest to Rabiku on the far side of the tray. Keeping that poisonous smirk firmly in place, Amira popped the candied animal into her mouth in one bite. Dame Rabiku's smile never faltered, but her eyes hardened. "Don't assume you know so much of the Empire, your ladyship," Rabiku said. Though many had already taken to calling Amira your highness, after the proper address for an archduchess, Rabiku constantly took care to remind her that she wasn't an archduchess, not yet. "You may be crafty, but you are still a borderland noble." Rabiku said borderland noble as if it were a euphemism. Thadrid watched, eyes sparking with mischief as he glanced between the two women. He took a sip of wine, watching them over the rim of his goblet. Rabiku's daughters watched in tense silence, no doubt used to their mother's various games by now. This was a dangerous play. Rabiku was betting a great deal on Amira being too weak or on unstable ground with Daendrith. She was betting that Amira wouldn't have the agency to push back. Even as the archduchess or empress, Amira would need allies in the court to win any real power. Rabiku was attempting to establish dominance in hopes of manipulating the future empress. Amira's mouth was full of gummy, sugary paste, and she had to chew several more times before she could swallow. Thadrid set down his own goblet in the tense silence and snatched up another of the marzipan foxes on the far side of the tray, like Amira had. Thadrid grinned at Rabiku as he did. The knight popped the fox into his mouth and wolfed it down. Mmm. He reached for his goblet of wine to wash it down. "Those are excellent. My compliments to your pastry chef." Amira gulped down hers and pasted her smile back on. The conversation shifted back into safe territory after that. They discussed the weather, the palace renovations, Amira's plans for tomorrow, the guest list of the upcoming ball, and minor politics of the palace. The assassin listened intently, as she did with all nobles, especially these days. It was a game Amira and Cromwell had played when she was younger. See how much you could learn about someone's ambitions and intentions by what they chose to discuss. Even the most careful, seasoned statesman couldn't keep his true thoughts wholly hidden. Even the greatest flatterer would give away their honest opinion in some way. When the time came for her and Thadrid to leave, Amira did her best to be gracious, imitating Fonra's smile as she curtsied. "Thank you, Dame Rabiku. You have been a most generous host." "Thank you, your ladyship," Dame Rabiku said, her wimpled veil dipping as she bowed in lieu of a curtsy. "Remember me fondly to His Highness?" Amira offered a tight smile. "I shall certainly remember you," she replied. Thadrid hooked Amira's arm through his. They left the dame's parlor and began the hobbling walk back toward her rooms. "That went well enough." "Aside from her calling me a crafty fox." Amira had been called worse, but it didn't lessen the sting as much as she had hoped. "She didn't technically call you that," Thadrid said. "She strongly implied it." Amira growled unintelligibly. "More games." "Politics is one great game. Isn't it fun?" "No," Amira said. "You just haven't started winning yet. Once you do, then it will be fun." Though that move eating the fox whole was quite good. Implying you could eat her whole too. Thadrid chuckled. "I didn't think about the symbolism, just what would be the boldest thing to do. Thadrid snorted. And it worked. That woman hates me, Amira said. She's afraid of you. That's practically a compliment. Rabiku has been one of the foremost players in this court for nearly 30 years. If she sees you as a threat, be flattered. Amira rolled her eyes. I'll try to hear compliments when she's reminding me of my mother's treason and my father's cowardice. Thadrid was quiet for several steps, his cane tapping every other stride against the floor. You get used to it, he said. It used to bother me until I realized they all envied my place in Dangerth's confidence. He scoffed. Honestly, I didn't even consider it until I was shaving. Dangerth and I grew up together. It was something I took for granted. Amira let a breath out her nostrils, watching sunlight play over the marble walls. The wind was blowing a tree outside the window, casting tangled shapes on the stone. They envy me, because they think I have some power over Dangerth. Well, you do, Thadrid shrugged. He overturned an imperial proclamation without informing anyone back in Manadra and caused more than a few shouting matches in the upper aristocracy because of you. What do you mean? I mean, Thadrid glanced around them before continuing, that Fonra was decided on because of Queen Adelaide's family connections as much as King Hyle's. When Dangerth picked you instead, the Boluses were so angry I thought Baron Bolus would have an aneurysm right there in the throne room. Amira stiffened. Up ahead, she could see the door to her apartment, guarded by 2 palace sentries. She tugged Thadrid back, ever so slightly, slowing their pace. There's been dissension over me? Oh, yes. Thadrid nodded. Much of it. What has Vesha said? In all the meetings I have attended, nothing. Thadrid shrugged again. She's let Dangerth explain himself to the nobles, which I think is good. It establishes him as ruler. Vesha has done a lot of letting him handle the nobles lately, more than ever since we returned from Highlandale. He added a frown at that. The 2 of them stopped, the door of her apartment in sight of the guards, some 20 paces off. Has Dangerth spoken to you at all today? Not really. Why? No reason. Amira cleared her throat. She supposed there wouldn't have been time for the 2 men to talk since this morning, since she'd kissed Dangerth, or he kissed her, or they'd kissed each other. She was afraid to ask Thadrid about what Dangerth had said. She did not want Thadrid involved in her and Dangerth's love life, or the lack thereof. But she ached for someone to talk to, someone who understood what Dangerth dealt with and who could give her advice. Did you 2 have an argument? Thadrid asked. No. Amira answered a little too quickly. Why? Thadrid's sideways look told her she wasn't fooling him. Nothing. Dangerth just seemed a little deflated when I did see him. Not like he usually is after he's spent a whole morning with you. Amira looked away at that. So, you did fight. You little liar. Thadrid chuckled, then grew serious when she didn't retort. Should I be concerned? No, Amira said, fighting back a rock that seemed to have lodged itself in her throat. It's fine. Is that girl fine? Amira frowned at him. What? You know how girls say they're fine but really aren't. The assassin rolled her eyes. It's nothing you need concern yourself with. It concerns my master, and as such, it concerns me. You're what? Are you his slave? Thadrid chuckled. Dangerth is all our concern. He glanced to the guards at the door to her room. I want him alive, and preferably happy. Call me mad, but you seem to make him happy. It's just, you know what. He's merely happy to have relief from that. I don't think so, Thadrid said. I personally find you semi-bearable at best. Amira's nostrils flared and she smacked his arm. It's true, but... Thadrid trailed off, studying her with a narrow gaze. You smacked me. Oh, that little tap, Amira sneered. What, did I wound you? No, you... Daedrith ordered you not to attack me. Thadrid's eyes widened. Then, he shot a look down the hall with a frown. No, the bond is still there. He seemed to be talking to himself. Looking back to her, he blinked twice, and his voice dropped to the softest of whispers. Daedrith said you could hit me. Not specifically. Amira raised her chin. He released me from his previous commands. That's all. Thadrid let off a low whistle. That son of a bitch likes to live dangerously. Careful, that's the empress you're talking about. Amira studied Thadrid. It was her turn to narrow her eyes. What did you mean by the bond is still there? Thadrid shrugged. You're still bound to him. Yes, Amira said slowly. But how did you know? Thadrid was quiet for 2 heartbeats. It was 2 heartbeats too long. Amira's eyes widened as the pieces fell in place. You're a Kadra'han too. Keep your voice down. The guards are watching us. Thadrid shot a look to the pair of sentries outside her bedroom door. No, they're not. And you didn't deny it. You're a Kadra'han. Of course. Why didn't I see it before? She looked him from head to foot. That's how you win every joust with your bad leg. That's how you survived your accident, isn't it? The accident that should have killed an ordinary man. Amira looked him over from head to foot. But you don't have magic. You barely have any ka. Thadrid's mouth tightened into a hard line. You don't need to be a full sorcerer to be made into a Kadra'han. A little latent power in the blood is enough to make the oaths stick. The knight cast her a venomous smile. Your father. Amira's mind whirred as several things made sense all at once. He was from the north, wasn't he? Clever girl. Thadrid sneered. Yes, it seems we could be distant cousins, perhaps. Though I pray to every god we're not. Amira looked the knight over like she was looking at him for the first time. She supposed he had more ka than normal, but his ring hid whatever else he might have had or used. The ring must have been what hid his oaths to begin with. Daedrith can't use a ring like yours, Amira realized, the pieces clicking into place. Because you have to be a sorcerer to use it. Excellent! Yes, that's correct, and you're not Daedrith's first Kadra'han. Thadrid smirked. Does that bother you? Amira didn't know how she felt about it. You're not the only bastard trained to serve the legitimate heir either. As much as she wanted to detest Thadrid, in that moment she found she might have even pitied him. I'm sorry, Amira said, for what was done to us. Thadrid straightened, looking past her out the dark window. For a moment, she thought some bitter retort was coming. Instead, he said, So am I. Do you remember it? Amira asked, voice soft. Taking the oaths? Thadrid shrugged. I remember repeating words that slid down my throat like castor oil. Then I remember falling flat out on my back when the force of them slammed me to the floor. Amira nodded. Darrigan here at the palace oversaw my training. He's trained most of the Kadra'han serving today. He must be 40 or 50 at least. Amira frowned. For a man that old, he didn't look a day over 30. It's his service, Thadrid said. He served Tristan and now Vesha well enough that his power is greater than all of us put together. Maybe greater than any Kadra'han in history. Who knows? The assassin hesitated, embarrassed by her next question for some reason. Does Daedrith have any compulsions on you? Thadrad scoffed. Of course not. Though gods know I do enough to drive him mad. He hasn't given me an order since we were children. We had jelly tarts, and I kept stealing all the gooseberry ones, you see. I see. Amira inhaled. This explains a great deal. Yes, well, I'm glad your aching curiosity has been satisfied. Now, I'm fairly certain I have a standing invitation from Gisela Rabiku for tonight. If you'll pardon me, my lady, I'd like to get you to your chambers as soon as possible. Amira smacked his arm again. You're shameless. Too many people tried to shame me in my youth, Thadrad said. It only inoculated me. Besides, our lot are entitled to our pleasures, don't you think? After all we've been through. Amira didn't answer that, but she supposed if anyone was owed some scrap of comfort, it was probably slaves. And whatever other names Kadra'han might have been granted over the years, protectors, servants of the great, kingmakers, armor-bearers, that was all they were in the end. Slaves. Amira ran through an endless cavern, rocks clawing at her like living things. Her feet bled, her hands had been scraped raw, and her red-stained shift barely covered her knees. She ran, forcing her way through the narrow passage. At her heels, she could hear them, moaning and shrieking through the tunnels after her. Amira! They called. Voices mingling together, the wails of the damned. Amira! The tunnel grew narrower, forcing her to slow. Her temple struck a low-hanging rock, and her head spun, but she forced her way onward. Their shrieks came closer. The dead couldn't be stopped by mere stone. They had no bodies to batter against the jagged rocks. No, Amira panted. No, 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 no. Amira ran on and on until the ceiling dipped, and she had to drop onto all fours and crawl. Her pursuers came closer, gaining on her with each racing heartbeat. The jagged rocks slashed at her like swords, and dirt clung to her bleeding wounds. Amira scrambled onwards, even as rotting and bony hands clutched at her ankles. Amira fought, landing kicks and punches, but her hands passed through them like mist. She couldn't touch them, but they could touch her, hurt her. No! They dragged her into blinding crimson light, dragging her by her hair, her arms, her ankles, her shift, anything they could catch hold of. She battled with everything she had, but every time she wrenched herself free from one, two more seized her. Their faces loomed over her. Those first bandits she'd killed with their heads lolling half-severed from their necks. A border lord with the knife she'd used still sticking in his chest. A merchant woman with black bile foaming from her mouth. A pirate captain still wearing the coil of rope she'd wrapped around his neck months ago. And a multitude of nameless others. White eyes watched her blindly. Grinning mouths chanted her name. They were vengeful and gleeful all at once, dragging her out to her reckoning. You killed us, their voices rasped. You killed us, Amira. I didn't have a choice, Amira screamed. I had to. He made me. She wept and sobbed and screamed out the truth over and over, but the shades didn't care. They dragged her out onto a flat stone floor, no longer in the cave. A dark stone ceiling arched overhead, stones as ancient as the bones of the earth, yet crafted by mortal hands. Candle smoke congealed in the windowless room, oppressive even from where Amira lay pinned to the floor. In the distance was the clamor of an army, the thud and boom of trebuchets. The ceiling shook as one of the stone missiles struck home outside. This was a scene Amira had revisited 1,000 times in nightmares throughout her childhood. The memory was branded into her as surely as a hot iron, only burning deeper with the passing years. "Shh," a familiar voice crooned. "Shh, it'll all be over soon." A dark silhouette towered above the insubstantial forms of the dead. "No!" Amira fought with renewed vigor, but the vengeful dead held firm. She could only writhe in terror as a gleaming silver knife appeared in the grasp of the dark figure. The dead chattered in excitement, pressing her harder against the floor. Amira screamed, but her struggles were as useless as a mouse fighting a serpent. Amira shrieked as the knife tore at the insides of her elbows. Blood sprang from the wounds and poured over her arms. It ran over the floor in rivulets, seeping across the ground. Unseen voices began to chant, female voices. The dead faded away, and in their place was a circle of hooded women. They dipped their fingers in her blood and linked hands, voices speaking in a language she didn't know. Nothing held Amira to the floor now, but she was too weak. Too weak. Her limbs wouldn't respond to her commands, and her eyelids flickered. The first figure, the one with the knife, dropped the blade, kneeling at her head. Hot tears splashed Amira's face as the woman pressed a kiss to her forehead. "Go to sleep, Amira," the figure whispered. "It's all right. Go to sleep." But it wasn't all right, and Amira didn't want to sleep. She wanted to live. Amira kept her eyes open, fought to cling to that shred of consciousness that was her life. "I want to live. I want to live," she thought, rolling the words through her head over and over. "I want to live." "Amira," a voice called. Male, distant, little more than a thought. The figure kneeling beside her slid her eyes closed, and Amira was too weak to even open them. "Amira," the man called again. In the darkness, she heard the voices of the dead calling her back as she plummeted down, back into the caverns where the specters waited for her. A scream worked its way up her throat, fighting for release. "Mama, I want to live." "Amira!" She fell back, falling into the caves again. The specters grabbed her, ripping at her bloody shift, tearing at her flesh. Their hands in various stages of decay, ripping at her with nails and bones. They tore at her face, arms, legs, thighs, belly, neck, back, and sides. They tore like starving animals trying to rip off a meal, like, "Amira, wake up!" The hands pinning her to the rocks flew off until only two remained. Amira thrashed, trying to wrench free. "Let me go!" she shrieked. "Let me go!" "Amira, it's me." The assassin drew a sharp breath and opened her eyes. Dangerith leaned over her, gripping her shoulders. "It was a dream. My love, it was a dream." Amira jolted into reality, breath coming in sharp gasps. She swung her gaze around the room, half expecting to see specters or the hooded figures that had surrounded her in the nightmare. But no. She was tangled in the velvet coverlet of her bed in Manadra. She panted, her heart raced, and her scars throbbed. But she was very much in Manadra. Shazni stood behind Dangerith, holding aloft a candle. "We tried to wake her, but couldn't," the lady's maid said. "She only kept screaming." Embarrassment flushed Amira's cheeks. "Thank you, Shazni," Dangerith said, not looking away from Amira. "Can you give us a moment?" Shazni nodded and lifted the hem of her dressing gown to leave. She left them alone in the bedroom, but the door remained open. Amira shoved up the sleeves of her nightgown, exposing her scars. Her right arm had marks to mirror her left. They were as they had been for years, jagged white tracks tracing over her veins. There was no fresh blood, no new wounds. "Is that what you were dreaming about?" Dangerith's voice was gentle. "How you got those scars?" Trembling, Amira shoved her sleeves back down. The memory of the nightmare burned along the marks. "Amira." Dangerith leaned closer. "Are you all right?" "I'm fine." The assassin hugged her arms against her belly. "I'm fine, Her words broke off with a shudder. She tried to stop shaking, but the memory, ricocheting through her skull, had other plans. Dangerous tugged her to him. "It's over now." He wrapped his arms around her, the solid heat of him seeping into her. Dangerous cradled her against his heart. She closed her eyes as her racing pulse slowed to match the rhythm of his. "Do you want to talk about it?" he asked gently. "I'm never going to be anything but a tool, am I?" Amira whispered. There was no accusation in her words, none of the venom she wanted to come out. There was only despair, flat and heavy as an anvil. "I'm always going to be a weapon." Whether for Dangerous, her father, her mother, or someone else. She would be used for power or protection, dead or alive. Tears sprang up, and she clung to Dangerous's arm. "My grandmother opened my veins to defy the Empire. My mother let her. My father." A sob worked its way up her throat, and she barely forced down her self-disgust. "The dead come for me, Dangerous. They scream at me. But I had to kill them. The curse made me obey." More tears dripped from her lashes and dropped on Dangerous' sleeve. "The sins of my masters come back on my head." A Kadra'han was nothing if not the perfect scapegoat. Simply order them to take the blame, and they had to. They had no other choice. "Listen to me." Dangerous pulled away enough so she could see his face. "I can't make you many promises, but I can make this one. I will never order you to kill for me." Amira blinked at him, not sure if she believed it. "And I will never ask you to suffer for me." He stroked back her hair, one hand cradling the side of her face. "You've suffered enough." Amira's heart leapt into her throat as she studied his face. Close enough she could feel his breath on her lips. He wasn't going to kiss her, especially not after yesterday, but how she wished he would. How she wished he would climb into the bed and comfort her with his touch for what remained of the night. But no, he made it clear that wouldn't be happening, even after they were married. Dangerous rested his forehead against hers and closed his eyes, one hand still cradling her face. Amira closed her eyes, squeezing them shut hard enough to keep out the lingering visions of her nightmare. "What are you going to do with me?" Amira whispered. "If I'm not going to be your assassin." "Or your lover," she added silently. Dangerous let off a long breath. "I don't know." It was all Amira could do to keep from crying again.